Today I'm going to talk to you about an early culture in Mesoamerica. That basically means Middle America, so it's sort of that central skinny part of the Americas. This is the region that we're talking about. Go ahead and take a look at this map from modern day Mexico into Central America. Humans came to the Americas later than they came to Eurasia and Africa, and there's less evidence left to us by earlier inhabitants of North and South America. So a lot of times we don't have that much to say about these cultures, but there's been a lot of archaeological work that's been done. So there are, a fair amount of things that we know about these civilizations. One of the earliest complex societies that we have evidence for in Mesoamerica are the Olmecs. Now, we have traces of Olmec culture that we have found that goes back as far as 2500 BCE. But archaeological evidence suggests that a highly organized society, which is the kind of society that we're interested in, began around 1600 BCE. The Olmecs were primarily located in the area between modern-day southern Mexico and Guatemala. The Olmecs lived in decentralized villages containing thousands of households, and they practiced subsistence farming. So that means that they farmed pretty much only as much as they needed. You can see the area where the Olmec culture was most centralized in this picture here. It's the red area. Farmers produced crops such as maize, beans, squash, and cacao. They engaged in inter-village trade and traded with others throughout Mesoamerica, often exchanging goods such as ceramics and rubber, and materials designed for religious purposes, including jade, obsidian, and special feathers, which they'd use to create ritual objects such as masks and figurines. Cities such as San Lorenzo were built primarily for devotional purposes and had large gardens full of sculptures depicting both human rulers and deities. Archaeologists have also found many smaller sculptures of animals and figurines of shamans who could communicate between the human and supernatural worlds. The Olmecs also developed a calendar, and priests studied the skies and the passing of the seasons. Now here on this image, you can see this is an example of a religious altar in another important Olmec city called La Venta. There have been debates as to whether the Olmecs should be considered a mother culture or a sister culture to other civilizations in the area, such as the Maya, because many of the aspects of Olmec culture seem to be reflected or replicated among the Maya. So the question is, are they a mother culture? Did the Maya get this from them? Or are they a sister culture that was operating at the same time and kind of sharing ideas? Scholars currently believe that the two civilizations likely influenced one another in an exchange rather than the Maya just deriving all their culture from the Olmecs. So scholars now are kind of landing on the sister culture bandwagon. There are also some suggestive similarities between the Olmecs and later civilizations like the Nazca and the Aztecs. For example, there is some evidence that the Olmecs may have practiced bloodletting like the Maya. Bloodletting instruments are found at Olmec sites, and we've had the example of the young lord statue, a 2-foot tall jade figurine that you can see here. The young lord statue is thought to have been a representation of a fierce ruler and a diplomatic artifact that would have been spread to convey his leadership. There are incisions or scars all over his body, and these are thought to be evidence of ritual bloodletting. Olmec cities also contained large courts for ball games, similar to the Maya. They used hard rubber balls which were bounced off the walls of the courts and their bodies. These games could be violent and may have included human sacrifice. We're not sure. This mural from a ball court is one of the pieces of suggestive evidence that says that maybe human sacrifices did take place as part of this game. This mural is from El Tajin, and it shows a man being killed at the center. And once again, this is located on a ball court. The Olmecs also built pyramid structures as part of their monumental architecture. So this is a lot like the Mayans and the Aztecs. So that's kind of another similarity that the Olmecs have with later cultures. The last similarity that we know about between the Olmecs and later cultures like the Maya, Aztec, and Nazca are the natural deities that they worshipped. They had a jaguar-like rain god, and they hoped that this god would provide rain and fertile land for them. So, in fact, the ball games that we mentioned earlier were played in honor of this important rain god. So, rainfall also played an important element in the Nazca's worship and ritual activities. So, here's another similarity, and scholars just don't think that all these similarities are coincidence. Perhaps the most famous example of architectural evidence from the Olmecs are these massive stone heads. These are found in various locations in modern-day Mexico. The heads can be up to 10 feet tall and as heavy as 50 tons. It remains unclear how the Olmecs moved the basalt stone from which they are carved over a distance of 100 miles, and it's unknown who these heads are meant to represent. Scholars don't believe that these people were using wheeled carts at the time that the heads were carved. We don't have any of those wheel marks that we saw with some earlier civilizations. And it's been suggested that the heads may represent rulers or even ball players. So these could be statues of very prolific ball players. It's also unclear what caused the Olmec civilization to decline around the 5th century BCE. The altars at La Venta and the large stone heads that were defaced and buried tells us that something kind of wacky went down. This leads scholars to believe that there is some significant change, like a regime change or a shift in belief systems that cause people to destroy these things. However, there's little evidence of a war or an uprising, so we don't think it was like a civil war or a revolt. The cities were abandoned before the communities on the outskirts, so it's not like people slowly left around the edges and then eventually depopulated the city. For some reason, the Olmecs deserted their cities quite quickly. It's possible that an environmental change made the city setters a less attractive place to live, really, than other regions. Scholars still don't know why, but by about 400 BCE, the Olmec civilization had largely collapsed. There were some people who were scattered in smaller settlements outside of the city centers, but that was really all that was left of what had really been a vibrant urban culture. That's all I have for you today for the Olmecs. Please finish the rest of the module so that you can move on to Module 3.